Often, the heart falls silent in the face of something so simple, yet so painful, not being able to finish the rosary. Perhaps you've experienced that moment when you start full of devotion, but suddenly, fatigue, distractions, or the busyness of life interrupt your prayer. And then, almost without noticing, a quiet weight settles in, as if you've failed God. I know how heavy that can feel in the soul, because it's not just about words left unfinished, it's about the sense of having missed a sacred encounter. It's a subtle, real ache that lingers and gnaws at the heart of anyone seeking a full, living spirituality. Father Pio understood this fragility better than most. He would say that, before God, even an unfinished prayer can become an offering, because faith is measured not by the number of words, but by the depth of surrender. This perspective shatters the rigid logic we often impose on our own spiritual life. It's like a seed falling on rocky soil. Even if it doesn't grow as we expect, if watered by the Spirit, it can still sprout and bear fruit. The value isn't in finishing perfectly, but in daring to begin with love. It's here we discover that prayer is more about the heart that prays than the number of beads we manage to pass through. And when I reflect on Jesus in Gethsemane, I find even more consolation. He asked his disciples to watch and pray, yet they fell asleep. Still, he did not reject them. He knew the spirit was willing, but the flesh was weak. That helps me understand that interrupted prayer is part of our human condition. It's not failure, it's humanity. What seems like defeat to us can be, for God, another chance to show that He values the truth of intention over the perfection of execution. And it is here that everything transforms. The sense of failure can become an invitation to deepen faith, to trust that, even in our limitations, He embraces every word, every effort, every attempt at prayer as a true act of love. The invisible wound of spiritual comparison. There is a pain few speak aloud, yet many quietly carry in their hearts: comparison. When we look at others and believe they pray more, better, or with greater devotion than we do, an invisible weight arises, stealing peace from the soul. Perhaps you felt it, the impression that your faith is somehow less because you couldn't finish the rosary, while someone beside you seemed to pray with ease and constancy. This comparison is not only unfair, it is cruel, because it turns spirituality into a competition, when prayer is always an intimate, unique exchange between the creature and the Creator. Father Pio warned against measuring spiritual life by numbers, repetitions, or appearances. Before God, the measure is not quantity, but the intensity of surrender. When we fall into the trap of comparison, we lose sight of what really matters. God sees the heart striving, even if it does not reach the end, not the perfect count of words. It's like a child bringing flowers to their mother. Whether the bouquet is large or small, what matters is the intention of love behind it. In spiritual life, it is always intention that carries the weight, more than perfection. The hard truth is that comparison steals the joy of prayer. Instead of living fully in the moment with God, the mind calculates what is lacking, or observes what others achieve. What should be an intimate experience becomes a burden. When this happens, we must pause and take a deep breath, receiving the interruption not as failure, but as a chance for gratitude. Silence can be as powerful as words. A pause can be as prayerful as a decade. In this space, comparison dissolves, and the essence is restored, an authentic, simple, living prayer that springs from the heart, not from the invisible ruler of comparison. The energetic block of anxiety. There is a quiet restlessness that follows many of us in prayer, the rush to finish. Perhaps you've begun the rosary with good intentions, but soon the mind hurries, the heart races, and it feels as though you must reach the end as quickly as possible. This anxiety does not stem merely from the clock, but from a deeper wound, the inability to remain present. Prayer, which should be a space of rest and surrender, becomes a silent race, each beat a step to be conquered. In the end, what remains is the sense that something was prayed, but little was truly lived. Anxiety creates a kind of discord between soul and body. The lips speak, but the heart can't keep pace. Father Pio said prayer is not a duty to be fulfilled, but a meeting to be savored. When the mind races, prayer loses its power. It becomes mechanical, empty, almost a ritual without soul. It's like a river running too fast. The water passes, but does not nourish the land. So too with rushed prayer. It passes the lips but does not feed the spirit. At this point, it becomes clear that anxiety is not merely psychological, but a spiritual block that steals the meaning of dialogue with God. Perhaps that's why it's so important to relearn how to pray as naturally as we breathe. Anxiety tries to convince us that victory lies in finishing, but the truth is, victory lies in staying. Staying with each Hail Mary as if it were the last. Staying with each mystery as if it held all of life within it. Staying in the rhythm of the heart, not the tick-tock of the clock. It is in this presence that prayer gains weight, warmth, and life. When we accept that a single decade prayed with love can be worth more than a rushed rosary, we discover that anxiety does not need to rule our spirit. In this way, every prayer, even a brief one, becomes a sanctuary for a weary soul. The invisible weight of regret. Many of us carry a burden we rarely admit aloud. It is the weight of regret. It appears in memories that return when we least expect them, words left unsaid, choices postponed, opportunities lost to time. Regret is like a silent shadow stretching across our days, reminding us that we could have done more, loved more, lived more fully. If left unacknowledged, this shadow becomes an inner prison, blocking us from seeing life with freshness and hope. But there is something even deeper in regret. It speaks not only of the past, but of the present being neglected. Every time we delay a decision, we strengthen this invisible chain. Every time we cling to comfort, we feed the guilt that will later feel unbearable. What seems small today can tomorrow reveal itself as the root of a vast emptiness. Unrecognized and untransformed, regret creates a silent cycle of pain that slowly erodes life's meaning. Yet there is a hidden secret in this weight. When faced squarely, regret can spark change. It can awaken us to the urgency of life, to the value of the now. Every quiet tear shed over lost opportunities can become a cry of courage. I will wait no longer. When we choose to see regret not as punishment, but as invitation, something new is born within us. In that instant, life ceases to be endless waiting and becomes fertile ground for possibility. Regret shows us a hard, necessary truth. There is no time to lose. It reminds us that life is brief and every minute matters. Transforming it into action is the step that sets us free. It is when we understand that nothing is truly lost, that we can still rewrite our story from this very moment. Regret, once a prison, becomes a guide, urging us forward, showing the value of the present, teaching us that tomorrow may never come, but the now is always ours. The danger of silent waiting. There is something treacherous about waiting. It disguises itself as prudence, patience, even wisdom. Yet in many moments of life, waiting is merely a veil to cover fear. How often have you postponed a dream, a decision, a word that could have changed everything, simply because you thought the time was not right? Deep down, you knew you were ready, but the silence of waiting felt safer than the boldness of action. This is where life tests us, at the boundary between waiting and doing. The danger is that waiting takes root. Each day we delay what could begin now becomes a brick in the wall of inertia. That wall grows slowly, unnoticed, until it feels almost impossible to scale. What was once a pause becomes a state of life. We get used to the unfinished draft, the unkept promise, the road never traveled. Waiting ceases to be a moment and becomes a destiny. And here is where awakening is needed. Because silent waiting, the kind born not of faith but of fear, is an invisible prison. Life does not wait. Time does not wait. And we, often without realizing it, may be losing precious years believing that tomorrow will be the perfect day to start. But the truth is both harsh and liberating. There is no perfect day. There is only this moment, and what you do with it will shape not only your future, but the legacy you leave behind. Rest in the midst of prayer. There are moments when the heart prays more than the lips. When someone falls asleep holding the rosary, often it is the soul that continues to pray, even as the body rests. Father Pio said prayer is measured not by the number of words, but by the depth of love. The rest that comes during prayer can be seen as God's embrace, a sign that He accepts that silent offering. To fall asleep in this moment is not failure, but a gentle way of remaining in His presence. This gesture reveals a truth often forgotten. Prayer is not a mechanical effort, but a living relationship. When someone surrenders to God to the point of sleeping in His arms, it is like a child who fully trusts in the Father's lap. That trust touches the divine heart uniquely, because it reveals the essence of faith, a faith that is simple, confident, and wholehearted. What matters is not how many Hail Marys are completed, but the sincere surrender that carried each word. Spiritual tradition teaches that this falling asleep is also a form of protected rest. The enemy finds no space where the heart rests in prayer, for the mind is occupied with God. Even unconsciously, the soul remains safeguarded. Many people report dreams of peace after falling asleep with the Rosary in their hands. It is as if the Holy Spirit transforms sleep into continuous prayer and rest into blessing. Prayer that transcends words. When the body surrenders to sleep during prayer, something invisible continues to unfold. The soul, even in silence, remains turned toward God. It is as if the heart becomes a small flame before the altar, needing no words to keep devotion alive. Father Pio often taught that the most powerful prayer sometimes arises from within, effortlessly, like a natural breath of the soul reaching for the Creator. This mystery shows that prayer depends not only on conscious effort, but on the love that moves it. Those who fall asleep with the Rosary in hand reveal that their last intention before rest was to remain close to God. This simple act carries immense spiritual strength, for even silence and sleep can be offered as praise. The Father, who sees all, receives this gesture as a sign of trust and surrender. At this point, prayer becomes larger than the person praying. Intercession continues, the fruits endure, and the soul rests while still in harmony with heaven. There is deep comfort in realizing that even human fragility, fatigue, sleep, can be transformed into worship. Falling asleep while praying is not losing the thread of prayer, but immersing in a purer form of it, where words cease and love continues. The mystery of silent surrender. There are moments in life when we believe we are only heard by God when fully awake, attentive, and articulate. Yet the spiritual truth runs much deeper. The Lord does not rely on our human limitations, for He sees the heart before He sees the lips. When someone falls asleep praying the Rosary, this gesture is not ignored but welcomed as silent surrender. It is as if the soul whispers, "Father, I am small, but I entrust even my rest to you." Father Pio understood this dynamic clearly. For him, the value of prayer was never measured by the number of words, but by the love hidden in each intention. When fatigue overcomes the body, but the last thought before sleep is the Rosary, there is a pure surrender, unmasked. Prayer becomes the breath of the soul, continuing before God even when the mind falls silent. This reveals a communion that surpasses human control and penetrates the mystery of the Spirit. This state of abandonment brings a powerful lesson. Prayer is not about performance, but intimacy. Many carry the belief that God demands perfection, strict discipline, and constant awareness. Yet He also embraces vulnerability. Prayer interrupted by sleep does not lose its power. Rather, it becomes a sign of trust. It is like a child falling asleep in the Father's arms. The Father does not reject the child. He rejoices because He sees a gesture of complete surrender. This truth must be kept close to the heart. Amid daily worries, the fear of not praying well can keep many from prayer. Knowing that even sleep can be an act of faith frees the soul from burdensome expectation and opens space for a more authentic spirituality. Prayer becomes a meeting, not an obligation. And it is in this meeting that grace flows, sustaining the soul even when the body rests. The depth of interrupted prayer. Often, we grow up believing prayer must be complete, measured, and precise to have value. But there is a deep mystery in what is interrupted. The prayer that does not reach its end often reveals more about the heart than a perfectly recited one. When the mind grows tired, the body falls asleep, and the lips stop, the soul continues its silent plea. Father Pio said that every intention carried with love is a precious offering, even if it cannot be fully spoken. It is in the gesture, in the surrender, that the Spirit rejoices, not merely in the outcome or the appearance of devotion. It is in this silence that a purer, unassuming form of prayer manifests. There is no need to measure words or count Hail Marys. Surrender becomes total precisely because there is no rush, no strain, only trust. It is like a fragrance that spreads in the air unseen, invisible, yet present everywhere. So too is interrupted prayer. The absence of words does not mean the absence of effect. On the contrary, often interrupted prayer touches the soul with a power that complete words cannot reach. The human condition is limited, but God is infinite. Therefore, He tenderly embraces every gesture. When we allow ourselves to rest amid prayer, accepting that fragility is part of life, we open space for a deeper intimacy with heaven. Every interruption becomes an opportunity for surrender, a chance to realize that we do not need to control the rhythm or complete every cycle to be accepted. There is a silent beauty in recognizing that the little we can offer, placed in God's hands, becomes abundance. The value of interrupted prayer is also revealed in the humility it awakens. Accepting that we cannot finish the Rosary brings us into contact with our vulnerability and, at the same time, divine mercy. Awareness of our limitation teaches that spirituality is not a competition or a performance to be measured, but a continuous dialogue where love and surrender matter more than perfection. It is here that interrupted prayer ceases to be a source of guilt and becomes a bridge to a deeper, more sensitive, and more genuine faith. The invisible battle during the Rosary. When we sit down to pray, we often don't realize we're stepping into a quiet battlefield. The enemy works subtly, almost imperceptibly, diverting our attention with wandering thoughts, minor irritations, sudden sleepiness, or desires that seem to appear from nowhere. Father Pio understood that deep prayer is not just an act of devotion, it is also a moment when spiritual forces confront one another, and that every distraction can carry significance far beyond what we imagine. These invisible battles make no noise, they are subtle and silent. They test our perseverance and our surrender. Sometimes, we believe the blame for not completing the Rosary is solely ours, but the truth is that a spiritual struggle is taking place. Every interruption, each sudden fatigue, every wandering mind can be seen as an invitation to remain aware, vigilant, and trusting. Understanding this changes completely how we view our lapses, for it is no longer simply a matter of discipline or laziness. The value of this knowledge is liberating. When we recognize that the invisible struggle is part of the process, we can approach our difficulties with greater compassion. It is not about failure, but about silent endurance. What seems like distraction or discouragement may actually be a test to see if our faith is rooted in true intention, not merely in results. Every interruption can become a moment to offer a sacrifice, to give to God what weighs on us, to make difficulty itself a part of the prayer. The enemy acts silently, but the power of surrender is even more silent and stronger. Each time we resist with love, even unknowingly, each time we return to prayer after a distraction, we cultivate an invisible spiritual strength that supports us through all of life. The battle during the Rosary is not a sign of weakness. It is an opportunity to recognize the divine presence amid difficulty, to transform each interruption into strength, and to realize that true prayer happens in the heart, not merely in the words. The mistake of trying to control God's timing. Often, when we pray, we are consumed by the desire for everything to unfold according to our own pace. We want immediate signs, quick answers, and visible results. But this urge to control divine timing is a quiet deception that blocks true surrender. Father Pio taught that prayer should not be used as a tool to secure protection or immediate benefits. When we try to turn the Rosary into a spiritual currency, we move away from the essence of faith, which is trust and surrender. This attempt at control creates an almost invisible inner tension. The mind races ahead of the heart, and the soul feels trapped between expectation and reality. What arises is a silent anxiety that weakens the quality of prayer and prevents grace from flowing freely. Prayer, which should be a space of intimacy, becomes a field of pressure and dissatisfaction. It is at this point that many fail to see the value of simply being in God's presence, without hurry and without conditions. God, however, works in mysterious ways. Sometimes He allows interruptions, distractions, or fatigue to enter our prayer. These moments are not punishments, they are invitations to patience, trust, and deep surrender. They remind us that divine providence does not move according to human haste, but that everything happens in the right time, when the heart is ready to receive. Interruption, then, becomes an opportunity for learning and spiritual growth. Each time we accept an interruption and return with trust, even without understanding why, we are practicing true faith. Repeating a simple short prayer or returning to the Rosary after a pause is an act of humility and trust. It shows that surrender does not depend on completion or perfection, but on persistence and an open heart. We learn that not controlling God's timing is, in fact, the key to making prayer more powerful and transformative, even when it seems incomplete. The technique of fragmented prayer. There are moments when time, fatigue, or life itself prevents us from completing the Rosary in a single sitting. But this does not mean prayer loses its value or that surrender is exhausted. On the contrary, there is a quiet beauty in dividing the Rosary into fragments throughout the day. Each decade can be like a small seed planted in the fertile soil of the soul, and even if it seems little, each gesture is nurtured by the Spirit who sees all. The manna in the desert teaches this lesson both practically and symbolically. God did not give all the provision at once. He gave daily portions, sufficient for each day. So it is with fragmented prayer. Each decade, each small pause, each moment dedicated to God throughout the day is significant. It is a daily portion of intimacy, surrender, and reconnection with heaven. What seems minimal, in God's hands, becomes abundant. This technique also brings unexpected freedom. When we understand that prayer can be spread throughout the day, the anxiety to complete the Rosary in one sitting disappears. The heart finds space to breathe and connect, without rush or pressure, only with intention and love. Fragmentation does not diminish the power of prayer. It allows God's presence to seep into every moment of daily life, transforming small instances into spiritual greatness. By adopting this practice, each decade becomes a breath, a conscious pause to remember that faith is not built on grand gestures, but on consistency and sincere surrender. Even when the mind wanders, even when the body tires, the soul remains connected. Each fragment is a bridge, each interrupted prayer a path, and each devoted moment an offering. In this way, the Rosary ceases to be just a ritual and becomes a way of life, a constant, quiet, and profound presence that transforms the heart without us even noticing.